control. It's something that's earned, but something that can also be taken away in the blink of an eye. The feeling of being powerless is something that horror games want for an obvious reason. You're not going to be afraid of things that you're stronger than. It may let you experience that rush of confidence, that surge of power, but not for long, and games that give you too much of it quickly lose the edge of being frightening. Dead Space starts you off with just the basic plasma cutter, and for a while at least, in its early hours, there's a great deal of tension as you deal with the narrow corridors and enemies with just that single weapon. Run out of ammo and you're down to flailing wildly to defend yourself. But as the game goes on, you upgrade your weapons, find new ones, upgrade your suit, upgrade your health, until stopping to kill enemies becomes less of a battle for survival as opposed to a ship-wide extermination. Your vulnerability in survival horror is a key part of the experience. In the last video we spoke about resource management, and that goes hand in hand with vulnerability to prevent you from becoming too powerful and confident, and is designed to keep your enemies seeming threatening. The more tools you have at your disposal, the more ways there are to defeat your foes, and the more resources you have to work with, the less fear there is of being at a disadvantage. And survival horror is all about that disadvantage. You're an isolated, under-equipped protagonist in the face of a much larger and numerous threat. You're vulnerable by default. It is only by the tactical and thought-out process that you ration what you have and make it out of this alive, as is survival horror. Action horror is the antithesis of survival horror. Games like F.E.A.R. revel in the stylish demise of your foes. Tearing through the replica soldiers is still tense, but rarely frightening, and the combat is immensely satisfying due to the powers that you have. But even that game has things that you can't kill. The ghost girl Alma is impervious to your bullets, and she disappears through walls and vanishes in situations impossible for you to replicate. She is, after all, a psychic manifestation. What she does is out of your control, forcing you to hallucinate strange events or creeping you out by projecting her shadow at you. Bullets don't do anything for that. When you think about it, the saving grace of the early Resident Evil games is that enemies couldn't follow you through the doors, a power that only you possessed. Once you're over that threshold, they cease to exist and you're safe, at least until the next time you go in there. So when Nemesis shows up in Resident Evil 3 and can follow you through the doors, the atmosphere of dread doubles as he swiftly becomes the greatest threat in the game. One of the ways that survival horror keeps you in check is by inventing tougher enemies to provide you with something humbling. Combat in survival horror is usually like a puzzle. Weak weapons for the weak enemies, bigger weapons for killing things quickly or stronger foes, and explosives for crowds. It's more of a right tool for the right job thing, which is why the introduction of a new enemy is always something that's going to put a player on edge, frightening design or not. The Resident Evil 4 regenerators can only be killed by precise strikes on their weak points that you can only see with the biosensor scope. They aren't like every other enemy and you can't treat them so. Firing fruitlessly into their body and head will just waste your ammo and get you killed. But the psychological aspect of simply facing these enemies for the first time is enough on its own. Your stomach drops when you keep shooting at it and it won't die. You count down the number of bullets you have in the back of your mind, telling yourself that you can't keep this up, but the enemy just keeps on coming. It's horrifying to be so utterly without control. Though games don't need to constantly introduce new enemies to do this, but it is a way to keep leveling the playing field. Alien Isolation has the same 3 enemy types the entire game: the humans, the working Joes, and the alien. The humans are much like you. They travel in packs, work together to survive the situation. They don't like strangers like you and will shoot you on sight. But like you, they die quite easily. The working Joes are androids, tougher than humans but slower and will beat you to death with their bare hands. Though stronger, they can be destroyed. And then finally the alien, a supremely talented predator with acute senses and a keen intellect. Even if it still acts like an animal, you cannot kill the alien, you can only hope to deter it from killing you. Alien Isolation gives you moments of feeling power when you destroy a working Joe, but keeps you hopelessly outmatched by the alien, forcing you into hiding since you can't even run away. Many people are rightfully on the fence on the debate of whether games are more frightening with the ability to fight back or not, and it is more reassuring to face horrible monsters with a weapon in your hand, and logically, not even trying to defend yourself in the face of the sort of threats you encounter in games like Amnesia: The Dark Descent seems silly. But suspending that disbelief, if you could club everything to death with furniture, what sort of threat would it be? As it stands, the enemies in Amnesia are not fazed by you throwing things at him. They stagger, and then get back to trying to kill you. Your feeble attempts mean nothing. But outside of enemies, there are plenty of other ways that games can relinquish the player of their control over the situation. Comfort is something that you get very rarely in horror games. Some games forego it entirely. Resident Evil, of course, has its iconic save rooms where enemies can't get in and you're safe to save the game and manage your inventory. Conscript has this too. A friendly blue light, similar to your army's colours, are displayed, and the relaxing music plays as you save. The rooms are marked on your maps, indicated by the blue door outside, a safe spot. Being a game about World War I set inside a French trench during 1916, things change quickly, and as the opposing army pushes forwards, save points are compromised. An enemy waits for you inside the save room, the item box is destroyed, the merchant is gone. Silent Hill 4 did something similar with Henry's apartment becoming hostile over time. Losing a save point and a save point in a horror game feels like a crutch being knocked out from underneath you, two depending on how far the next one is. Control is something you have briefly, a mounted gun, a well-stocked arsenal, and just as easily as it's given, it's taken away. Vulnerability can be inflicted at any moment, whilst proficiency in resource management can leave you armed to the teeth and ready to deal with any situation. If the game takes away your weapons, then your facade of control goes with it. You're no longer in control of the situation is always in control of you. The house always wins.
Please deposit any metallic items you have in the security box.
Code Veronica has a section that won't let you progress until you put all your metal objects into a container, including every way of defending yourself. Stripping you of your weapons is an awful feeling, but even thematically these things work. When Penumbra Overture ended, you had multiple makeshift weapons at your command to defend yourself from the enemies, but after being struck in the back of the head at the start of Penumbra Black Plague, those weapons were taken. What villain would leave their enemy armed? Taking away your weapons, presenting harder enemies, taking away your safe zones. But what about just making you do what it wants, giving you no options? You can't help but feel a sinking feeling when all your options are reduced to one, like you're being toyed with and that something bad is definitely lying ahead. In Silent Hill's Alchemilla Hospital on the 3rd floor ward, you hear the sound of the door locking behind you as you walk down the foggy corridor. You can't go back because the game doesn't want you to. There's no escape from what lies ahead. This sort of thing works far better in psychological horror, where there doesn't need to be as many real-world explanations to as why things happen.
Hey, we gotta get the fuck out of here.
Now first you need to tell me what you're doing out here alone in the middle of the night.
Me? What about you?
No, it's my job. Won't you do your job and tell me? Answer my questions.
You're not gonna believe me if I told you.
Try me. Hey, put that door back. Put that door back up. Put that door.
Many survival horror games will lock you in a room with a monster until one of you emerges, as is the age-old boss fight. Ethan versus Jack Baker, James Sunderland versus that awful red pyramid thing. Boss fights are just one way of presenting you with something powerful, but giving you a sliver of hope as to your survival. But a sliver of hope is all you really need. Whilst many enemies in survival horror are difficult to take down, resistant to your attacks, and even seemingly immortal, none of them really are. They all meet the same end.
Next time, take the fucking hit! Good riddance.
This is the second part in the series on survival horror, with a third part coming sometime after this year's Halloween on enemy design. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you to the patrons who support the channel. It means a great deal.